G'day, bird nerds. I'm Grant, and I'm a bird nerd. This is the bird emergency because, by jingoes, it is an emergency. And that's where I get to talk to other bird nerds, people interested in conservation, researchers, ecologists, doers, activists. You get the gist. And today, it's Gregory Andrews. Now, Gregory is a Dharawal man, and he was appointed the very first of Australia's threatened species commissioners. And remember that, we're going to get to that a bit down the track in the show. I've been waiting to talk to someone about threatened species commissioner for a long time, and I've got one of them. That's so cool. Anyway, the reason that I got Gregory in and on is because he's managing some land for wildlife. It's called Wombat Ridge. He owns it. He's whacked a covenant on it, which means it's protected. It's out near Goulburn. But this guy's pretty amazing. He was just telling me about some of the travels he's done in recent years, so we might touch on that. But he's the Associate Adjunct Professor of Applied Ecology at the University of Canberra. Actually, I might have got the Applied Ecology wrong because it's the Institute of Applied Ecology, but we'll talk about that more. So, without any further waffle, Gregory Andrews, welcome to the Bird Emergency.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Now, let's bring this in. This is what got me fired up to get hold of you. This is a tweet you put out. Just saying, this weekend we installed 12 nest boxes for endangered glossy black and gang cockatoos. Thanks to the Biodiversity Conservation Trust New South Wales for funding support, and arborists Dean and Lennox, and we're going to talk about Dean and Lennox in a minute, for their expert climbing. Now, the good news is both of the species came and had a look, so that's great. But look at this, 13.6 thousand views, and the notifications have been popping off, absolutely popping off. Oh, I don't want that one there, do I? I want that one. There we go. So, Gregory, let's first have a brief rundown of your career. And actually, let's leave out, I finished uni and blah, blah, blah. Let's talk about when you got involved in or interested in conservation and what led to getting appointed the Threatened Species Commissioner.
Yeah, that's a good question. And because I trained as an economist, but as an Aboriginal person, I've always loved wildlife and been passionate about country and connecting with country. And actually, when I was at school, the only time I ever got detention, it was for putting up Greenpeace posters and refusing to take them down. So look, I've always had a really strong, deep passion for conservation. But yeah, you're right. I spent 2/3 of my career as a diplomat, and actually after the Threatened Species Commissioner, I finished up as Australia's ambassador to Ghana and 9 countries in West Africa. But wherever I was in my career, I always tried to integrate conservation. So in Africa, for example, I used Australia's aid program to support the rangers at Mole National Park, Ghana's biggest national park, with one of the last strongholds of elephants, savanna elephants, which are now endangered. So I used Australian aid to help them and supply them with camera equipment from Outdoor Cameras Australia to do more monitoring of the species, but also to keep an eye on the poaching and keep the poaching at bay. But I was really lucky to be appointed as Australia's first Threatened Species Commissioner, and I felt pretty special actually to be an Aboriginal person in that job, because as Aboriginal people, caring for country is part of our identity, part of our DNA. And so when I got that job, I can say with my hand on my heart, it was the best job I ever had. I put my heart and soul into it, and probably if I know that there's like more numbats in Australia now, and that the Norfolk Island green parrot is a lot safer and its numbers are a lot higher thanks to work that my team did. So yeah, that was a fantastic job and definitely the favourite job I had in my career.
I, I'm sometimes really cynical, and I'm too mean about the threatened species hub. I never want to downplay any of the amazing work that's being done
Yeah,
with it.
yeah,
But I think I'll leave the comments to that about that until after we've covered Wombat Ridge and
yeah. Good idea.
Lyrebird Dreaming.
Yeah,
Um,
but actually, just before, I think that's a good idea. But what I would say is, although I was a diplomat for most of my career, I think that's what the Threatened Species Commissioner position needed. And over time, it'll change. But as Australia's first Threatened Species Commissioner, I remember when I finished up and I said to the Threatened Species Scientific Committee, like 12 people who are kind of the absolute expert in their field, whether it's like dugongs. Sorry, that's my dog Fred. Hey,
who's that?
that's Fred, my dog Fred.
Hey, Fred. How you going, Fred?
I remember saying to them, look, sorry for butchering the science. And they said, no, we thank you because you helped interpret for us with the rest of Australia. And so I think the main contribution that I made as the commissioner and the asset that I had as having been mostly a diplomat, but also an Aboriginal person focused on communication. And my dreaming is the lyrebird, which speaks the language of all the animals, as you know, was exactly that, to be a bridge between science and reality. Because if we want to save species, it has to be more than just pure science. We need everyone on board, and we've got to compete with Kim Kardashian for attention, and Bali
Well,
and plasma screen TVs, and so that was what I tried to do when I was the commissioner. Remind Australians that our identity is embedded and etched deeply with our wildlife. You know, our sporting teams are named after them. We've got them on our money, on our coat of arms. Our de facto national flag has the boxing kangaroo. And so if we lose our biodiversity, we're losing what it means to be Australian.
well, I'm going to come back to the
Righto.
commissioner because I have some thoughts, and
Yep.
I'm sure people who are here with us now will have some thoughts as well.
Yeah.
Uh, but first,
Hmm.
let's talk about your project at Wombat Ridge. Give
Yeah.
us the origin story,
All right.
and
Yeah. Well, look, actually, it comes back to the Threatened Species Commissioner again, because when I was the commissioner, I kept meeting people who were covenanting. I kept meeting people who were buying land and putting conservation covenants on it. And I realized before that, I had this mindset that wildlife protection was something that belonged in national parks. But national parks are only a small area and a small share of Australia. And our animals and plants aren't aware of where national park boundaries are. But also, often national parks are really constrained with funding. And the funding that they do get is prioritised for what they call visitor experience, you know, barbecues, campgrounds, roads. And the rangers actually have to spend a lot of time looking after people in national parks rather than looking after the animals and plants. So I realised that conservation covenanting had huge potential. And so when I finished up as the commissioner, I had this privilege for 3 or 4 years of learning from and having access to some of the best and most passionate conservationists, whether they were scientists or naturalists, or national park rangers, or individual private people covenanting land to protect cassowaries or eastern quolls or 40 spotted pardalotes. And I realized that was something I wanted to do. And I felt that I was a really lucky person. My wife and I had paid off our mortgage. We're not into consumption and mindless consumption, which we're actually against that because it's causing major problems for the world. We're way outliving our global footprint. And so we decided to buy some land and put a conservation covenant on it. So yeah, we bought Wombat Ridge, which is 50 hectares, about 120 acres, and it's about an hour and a half's drive from Canberra, here where I live. And we've just got a sort of a 7-point management plan, you could call it, for Wombat Ridge. You can see those photos there. We basically do feral animal control, all of the usual suspects there. Goats, deer, feral pigs, foxes, feral cats are our main targets. And then we control weeds. Actually, it's less sexy than the cockatoos, but last week we had someone out there every day, a weed contractor, spraying, targeted selective spraying of any weeds that he could find. Then the other thing that we do that I'm really passionate about, and I love doing it, and I love engaging non-Indigenous people because we need more people to do this, is cultural burning. So in winter, we have a cultural burning program. And then we also do regeneration, both natural and assisted, using dead wood, tree planting. Then we've got a threatened species reintroduction plan where we're reintroducing endangered plants like some of the beautiful little endangered daisies, the paper daisies. We also have a tree thinning program, which I'm really interested in, which is actually about making sure that the ratios of different trees are ideal for the more complicated structure with the understory. And so where some of the trees are a bit overabundant, carefully and according to good science, removing some of them to get the ratios right. And then the final thing that we did that created the attention last week is our habitat supplementation strategy. And I was lucky enough to get a grant from the Biodiversity Conservation Trust, which is the mob in New South Wales that you sign these conservation agreements with. And they provided us with some funding to have 12 purpose-designed nest boxes built and then installed. And we had an arborist to climb right up high in the trees to install those. And those are for glossy blacks and gangangs. And we see the gangang cockatoos quite a lot out there. But something really special for me was that the 2 days that we were installing them, the glossy blacks came in on both of those days. And we know they're there because we see the evidence of them eating the casuarina seeds. But before the weekend that we installed them, a week and a half ago, I'd only seen them 3 times in 4 or 5 years. So I knew they were there, but I don't see them very often. But for me, I think personally, the fact that they were there the day we arrived to install them, and they sat and watched us on the second day when the arborist, Lennox and Dean, were climbing up those trees, is pretty special.
Now that's Lennox and Dean, isn't it?
Yeah, that's Dean on the left and Lennox, his son, on the right. They're Maori fellas. And I just found them through, Google Maps, where you type in, arborists in Goulburn, and they came up. Climate Tree Services, I think what they call their business. But they were really, really happy to do it. Immediately said yes, didn't even really care how much they got paid. And I said to them, I said, I felt that it was really special and symbolic that an Aboriginal fella who'd bought land and wanted to install these cockatoo boxes, was getting help from two Maori to put them up in his trees, and they really like that too. And I like the fact that they're a father and son team. They're quite cheeky with each other. Lennox is a bit like a sugar glider, just flies up the tree so quickly you wouldn't believe.
I think where's the shot of him up the tree? That's
yeah, there he is up the top of one of the trees.
Yeah,
and we've had koalas in those trees as well. We've caught koalas on our camera traps climbing down from those trees and going across to other trees. But I think the reason we installed those boxes is we knew that it was good habitat. And with the glossy blacks, the bird nerds will all know, glossy blacks compared to, say, yellow-tailed black cockatoos are endangered because they're fussy. And like all birds, have to deal with major habitat depletion and disruption and climate change. But the yellow-tailed black cockatoos, we get them here in Canberra because there's pine trees up just behind my house here. So the yellowtails are better at adapting. They'll eat pine nuts but the glossy blacks really only eat casuarina seeds, and then they eat a few banksias that will only open when there's the right amount of fire. And and then that block, Wombat Ridge, although it hasn't been farmed, nearly all of it is uncleared. But 100 years ago, it was selectively logged by the surrounding farmers and colonisers to get the wood to build their fences and houses. So there's a you could call it not an absence, but there's not a lot of good nest hollows for birds or things that need big old 300-year-old trees, because there's the oldest trees there close to 300 years, but there's a bit of a shortage of them. So the idea with the nest boxes is to replicate that and get those really good hollows going. And so, yeah, we'll be monitoring those. And I hope I can come back and tell you the story and share the photos and video footage when we have baby glossy blacks in those nest boxes.
I hope we can do an ongoing sort of tracking of the story of
Wombat Ridge.
But
the interesting thing. Oh, sorry, I was just going to say the interesting thing about how it all fits together is with the cultural burning. And when I think I was telling you just before when we were having a chat about what we could talk about on this show, but when I do the cultural burning, the glossy black, not the glossy blacks, the gangs come in. And then I was wondering about that because I thought they're not carnivores. So why would they be coming in? Because they're not looking for lizards or anything or that's escaping. But actually, I'm pretty sure that they would have, I know they evolved with cultural burning for tens of thousands of years in southeastern Australia, and they would have learnt through evolution that where Aboriginal mob do these cool winter burns with the white, soft, billowing smoke, that's actually going to be a safer place for them to find nests to avoid canopy, like bushfires going up into the canopy in summer. So I'm pretty sure that's what's going on.
And I
think there's a crimson rosella that's just coming.
There is. I was just going to say that'll be a good lead into our. That'll be a good lead into our habitat.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But
there's one on the tree there, actually. See, just.
Oh yeah. Just there. I want to make a comment about those gangs and your burning, which I know we've spoken about before. But first, can you tell us what your arborist friends told you about another time they were hanging nest boxes?
I don't want to get them into trouble, but however, basically, it relates to the integrity of biodiversity offsets. And they were, let's just say, you know, as everyone knows, I was a threatened species commissioner. So I learnt by osmosis, but I don't have a degree in ecology. I've got a degree in international relations and a degree in economics. And I've got my associate adjunct professor position at the Institute of Ecology because of the relationship between policy and ecology. So that's what they rely on me for, not because I'm an expert ecologist. But I think, like stories that I've heard so many times, these guys were just really grateful that I knew that the boxes had to be a certain height and that they should face east and don't put them too close together, and otherwise the birds will think, oh no, there's two nest holes too close together there, it won't be very good for us, you know, we'll have competition.
Squabbles.
There's so many stories about people implementing, because the other work they do is for either like trimming trees under electricity wires or occasionally installing nest boxes for biodiversity offset programs. And let's just say there was no expert advice at all on how to install them. So they knew how to climb up the tree, but they had no one to tell them from the company that was actually investing in offsets how the boxes should be installed, you know, what height, how to manage predators. And so the integrity of those offsets was really dubious.
Yeah, which is one of the ongoing issues. And of course, when I spoke with Mick Callan once, and we were talking about the need for artificial hollows.
Yeah,
I mean, the scale of the deficit, the number of hollows that were in deficit is in the billions in this country.
Yeah, it is. And because all the old paddock trees are dying, some of them because they're that age, others from climate change and drought, but there's been no regeneration of those paddock trees. So we're facing this cliff. We're hitting a cliff, which is actually how I first learned about these cockatubes. Those boxes that you were showing, they're the ones for the gangs, but the ones for the glossy blacks are actually 1 metre high, and they have an open hole on the top. And in WA, they've spent a lot of time working out the science behind it, and the cockies there love them. But one of the reasons is there's just no paddock trees anymore. They're all reaching the end of their lives and dying. And this is a cliff that we're facing that has a sort of 200-year origin. So we can't rely on paddock trees. We've got to help the species adapt.
And as we come into the urban fringes, we've now got the situation where any tree that is, in the process of forming hollows is now rated as dangerous. That's
right.
So they
I know we're going to talk about. I know we're going to talk about. There's the crimson rosellas at my bird feeder. I thought I'd just show you that before, just in case they're not there later on when we're talking about birds in gardens. But yeah, actually, the other thing that I noticed when I was the commissioner that made me happy when I went to Kangaroo Island was the beautiful vegetation along the sides of the roads. But around here where I live, around Goulburn, it infuriates me because the council chops it all down. And it's some of the last vestiges of more complicated, what they call, the sort of like biodiverse habitat structure. But the councils think it's dangerous for cars, and so that all gets chopped down. And I'm trying not to be a grumpy old man, no.
No, that's my job, mate. Okay. So, but one of the other issues as well is that we have permits issued in other parts of the country where people can take timber from roadsides for domestic firewood collection. And of course, there's no monitoring of that, so people are felling trees that show any sign of rot as well. And of course, that's habitat for bats, for lizards, for all sorts of invertebrates and gliders.
And this is the problem. And actually, that example in the Northern Territory at the moment of all of that land clearing, that's going on, allegedly illegal land clearing for cotton farming. That we often, unfortunately, regulation has become a dirty word, and it's green tape, and we need to get rid of it.
Yeah.
But if you have a beautiful offset scheme, but no one's holding the people who are investing in the offsets accountable, then it can be, if you're lucky, it'll work. If you're unlucky, it'll be a complete waste of time. Which was so many stories I've heard about nest box being installed, and because they're too low, so they just fill up with snails and not a single target species benefits. And so we have all these regulations, but implementing regulation is seen as, like, I think because regulation's a dirty word and tax is a dirty word. I'm proud to pay my taxes because my taxes are actually making it. I'm proud to be Australian and I love the things we have in Australia, and I'm proud to pay tax. But because taxation, the politics of taxation is about cutting tax, there's no money for regulators to actually audit or control or investigate. And then regulation is also a dirty word. It's seen as green tape that hinders business development. But so many of the problems we face, if we just had good regulation and enforced it, we wouldn't even need to spend that much money to fix the problem. We just need to implement the good, strong laws.
I can't resist, Gregory. I have to throw in a bit of snark and a bit of smart-ass comment here.
Yeah.
If you're hearing this or watching this and you're one of those people who complains about taxes and complains about rates, don't you dare ever complain about the elective surgery waiting lists or potholes. Piss off, okay? There you go.
I actually hate corruption, and the corruption under the last government infuriated me. And I'm so glad that
were awarded.
Exactly. I'm so glad
that were awarded billions of dollars to people who couldn't manage. They couldn't manage to get to lose their virginity in a house of ill repute. I mean, they were, and in every portfolio, and then you've got people squawking about, a 0.5% rise in their rates at the same time they want to whinge about their rubbish collection being reduced. The reason that all the services are being reduced is because the money has been just funneled into rubbish. So anyway, let's do a whole other show about that, because I want to bring. Actually, I'll let people know
the benefits of an ICAC for Australia's biodiversity. But once an ICAC is fully operational and effective, hopefully people will be more confident about paying tax. But we need to shift this narrative that tax cuts are good and tax increases are bad. Because tax is actually investing in all the things that make our country great. I'm proud to pay my tax. Yeah.
I'd just to see some
I would like to see a lot more of my tax paid on conservation. And I'm quite proud of the ACT government, because they spend ACT tax money on species that don't even on species programs that have no immediate benefit for the ACT. So they run I know we're supposed to be talking about birds, but sorry, this is wallabies.
No, we're talking about everything.
I'm addicted to marsupials, but I do love birds. And I am a bird nerd. But they have a program out at Tidbinbilla where they have a brush-tailed rock wallaby breeding program, and they use yellow-tailed rock wallabies as surrogate mums to carry brush-tailed joeys, and every joey goes to Victoria. So I'm proud of that. I want my ACT taxes to pay for that, because I don't care about state boundaries. I care about wallabies, and I'm so proud of the ACT government for spending ACT taxpayers' money on something that Victoria supposedly benefits from.
And is that the rock wallabies in East Gippsland or the ones in the Grampians?
I think they're in both. They're called brush-tailed rock wallabies, and they're definitely in the Snowy Mountains country.
Yeah,
but I'm pretty sure.
I think it's the East. I think it's the East
Yeah,
Gippsland
I
population.
thought it was the same species, but I could be wrong. But when I was the commissioner, there were a couple of times when I got a crush on a particular animal, and the biggest crush I got was on this rock wallaby called Lily, and she's just the most beautiful yellow-tailed brush rock wallaby, and she'll come and sit on your lap, and she works full-time as a surrogate mum for brush-tailed rock wallabies. And all of that is quite an expensive program, but that's what we need more of. We need governments to be proud to invest money in saving these animals and plants that define who we are as a nation.
We'll have another discussion another time about some of the really great projects that have been under the stewardship of the Threatened Species Commissioner and the hub, the recovery hub. I'll just let people know too. I just got confirmation earlier today. Next Monday's slot here is with Martin Ty, and we're going to be talking about degrowth. So I've got some questions about how do we make degrowth something that the mainstream will swallow, especially the way that our economy is structured. So if you're interested in the sort of economics and the adjunct to conservation, come back next week as well.
Yeah.
Okay, let's jump into habitat gardening, since you gave us a tease into into your backyard. I first want to ask, what is right behind you, because I can't see well enough. What's the purple flowers there?
They're actually there's a crimson rosella eating on my bird feeder.
Yeah, on the bird feeder.
Actually, underneath the bird feeder, that's all.
Are they a heritage hydrangea behind?
Yeah, they're hydrangeas.
And
this is my favourite hydrangea. I'll just pick one off to show everyone. Look at that.
We go. Yeah, we used to have that growing. When I studied at Burnley, we had some of those. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad I picked that out with my dodgy eyesight.
No, that's really good. Actually, I'll do a panorama if you want. This is my front yard, and that it's mostly actually non-Indigenous. But then actually over the back, I've got a crabapple grove, and I've got native plants understory. And so all of the understory is locally endemic wattles, hakeas, bottle brushes, endangered daisies, native grasses, and a few non-locally endemic salt bushes. But our garden, when we bought this place, we've been here for 16 years. It was just a lawn. And probably if I'd had my own way, everything would have been native. But we also wanted a lot of deciduous trees to let the winter warmth come into the house.
And in Canberra, you have to do that.
Yeah.
When we were having our conversation to sort of set up what we would talk about, I was really impressed with one of your strategies that you told me, and that was that even though you have so many things that are not native plants and not Indigenous, but that you have some sort of plan to replace them, and that you can't rip something out that birds and animals are using before you have something that is able to be used by the wildlife at the time that you take it out. So.
Exactly. And actually that principle, even if you're getting rid of blackberries or something, out in
Yeah,
nature.
lantana,
Got to follow the
everything.
same principle, yeah. And so here, like actually in these hydrangeas, there's a family of superb blue wrens that just love it in there. And also because if we've got little bits of Parmesan cheese or like food scraps on our plates after dinner, we throw that into the bushes, and they come every day looking for all of that. And so do the white-browed scrub
I was going to
wrens.
say the scrub
Yeah,
wrens would have been in on that
yeah,
straight away.
and they love it. They don't really care that it's non-native, because we're actually very close. We're less than 100 meters from native bushland, and so we've actually got Canberra has these wonderful bush corridors that come nearly everywhere, and so what we do with our garden is we try to provide habitat complexity. Like actually, I've trained Fred to chase the cats, the roaming cats. He wouldn't attack them, but he barks at them and chases them out of the garden. And I've also cat trapped. I've had cat traps out there. So we control aggressive. What we do in our garden is we try to provide habitat structure. We choose not to own a cat, and we discourage cats from coming into our garden and encourage local owners to keep cats indoors. And then we provide supplementary feeding. I always clean the feeders and the bird baths, but and then we also control dominant species. So like I don't feed currawongs. And actually, I shoo the currawongs off, but I hand feed a family of magpies. They come inside sometimes, and they'll sit on my lap, just here where I'm sitting. And they come in the morning, they see me making the coffee, and they call out, and I give them dog food because that's kind of balanced and healthy.
Yeah.
I would never give them mince or bread. And then all the granivorous parrots, I give them like good quality mixed bird seed and clean their feeders regularly. I think that the reality is that Australia is no longer a utopian wilderness, and birds in backyards, they're wild birds, but they're not in a wilderness, and they've adapted to this. I'll just show you how I've trained Fred to bark at the cats. Fred, where's the cat? Where's that cat? Where's the cat? Go on, you get the cat. Can you hear him barking?
I can. That's great.
That's often enough just to chase the cats away. Where's that cat? Go on.
My morning walking companion Shadow also is manic about cats and rats, and we have rats that run along the fence here, and he just goes troppo.
Oh yeah. Actually, the other thing we have in our garden is we have nest boxes, which I put up for the crimson and the eastern rosellas, but I'm pretty sure that they've all been taken over by possums.
Yeah.
The possums have actually bitten them out. But I love the possums. At night time, I hand feed the possums as well. I go out and give them, like I have another feeder, like a bird feeder, that I put. Our compost, I separate it into possum food and straight to the compost, because the possums were opening the lid on our compost and going through it anyway. So I pick out the nice like things, and if I give them a piece of pear or banana, they'll take that out of my hand, and I love that.
Like? What do they like best?
The possums
Fruit?
really. They like fruit, yeah, and they probably shouldn't have too much because it's probably a bit high on the glycemic index for them.
Yeah.
They love banana and they love apple cores. I save all my apple cores and any greens, like if there's some lettuce or something that's a bit how's your father, then I'll put that in the possum tray. Yeah.
And do you put that on a different tray, like it's separated from where any of the birds feed?
Yeah, it's a separate tray, and the birds could land on it if they want, but they don't really seem to be that interested in it. We do get bowerbirds in our garden, and I wouldn't be surprised if they got into it, but I usually just put that out after dinner. So and then it's gone in the morning. So it's sort of the nighttime and the daytime, but a different feeder.
Well, let's talk about some of the highlights in your garden.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what the most popular plants are in your garden that wildlife seem to use? And that
Yeah.
could be any wildlife. And then tell us some of the highlights of the animals that are using your garden.
The species, yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I think we've planted about 20 trees. And I think if I had to say what do they like the most, it's the trees, because the trees provide shade. The crabapple trees have crabapples that all the different parrots and cockies get into. So they provide some food, and a lot of the shrubs underneath provide that complexity for smaller birds. But you've just put up the absolute highlight for me. So we have a pair of gang cockatoos that come about once a week or once a fortnight. And they usually just come and sit in one of the trees and start going and call out to me. And if there are other birds in the bird feeder, they know. And then I just walk out and stand next to the bird feeder. And then the other birds are too scared. And then the gangs come down and like they'll fly down and they'll brush. Their wings will brush past my head. And if I hand food to them, they'll look at it, but they prefer not to eat out of my hand.
Yeah.
So those, just because I just love them. But the other bird that I really love that visits every day, is the king parrot, and that's particular. I call her Mama. That's the mother king parrot. She comes with her fella, and they wait, and they know that they're too shy. They let the rosellas and everything else bully them, so they just sit in the trees, and then they just start going beep beep beep. And then I just come out and sit down where I am now with some seeds in my hand, and they just land on my hand. And she particularly just like sits on my lap and sits on my hand. And I love her. I really love her. I've got a bond with her. And the really interesting thing about her, and this is where I think some people might think, oh, it's the indulgent feeding birds. It's a one-way relationship. It's not. Like, she remembered. We went to Africa. Yeah, we were out of this house for 2 years when I was in Africa, and when we came back, within 2 weeks, she was back, and she was just sitting here going peep peep, and just came and landed straight on me. She just knows me, and she knows my son, and she trusts us, and so they integrate us into their lives and their food sources. And for me, I think
you're like the 7-Eleven down the end of the street.
I am. It's like I have to be really strict on myself not to let them have too many sunflower seeds, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm not a purist. It's like later on after this, I've got to go and pick my daughter up. She works at Macca's, and I say to her, "Look, darling, try not to have Macca's every time you work there, because it's not healthy, but it's sometimes food." And so, look, it's the same with sunflowers. Like, we don't have to be absolutist about it. So occasionally I give them sunflowers, but they do know that if they come here, particularly, I love the way both she and this pair of gangs have worked out that they'll come to my place when they want something and I'm home, and they'll know that I'll come out.
Yeah.
And that their way of getting the food is to trust me when the other birds don't. I love that. Yeah.
Well, they're very intelligent. Now it's a good opportunity to point out the figures that Daryl Jones told me in an earlier show, was that between 20 and 35% of households in Australia, and that's replicated over most of the Western world.
Yes, it is.
Are feeding birds. So I think that if anyone was to say don't feed birds, and I used to be in that camp, that war has been lost. That battle is over. So what we want to do now is make sure that people who are feeding feeding in a way that is not detrimental to the birds.
Right way feeding, which addresses nutrition, sanitation, avoids or minimises the impacts of predators and dominant birds. Which is why I started feeding the magpies, because I realised the currawongs were getting it, and I didn't want the currawongs. So then I started hand feeding them, and the currawongs won't take it out of my hand. So they're pretty much learned. And I did used to have, when my son was younger, I had one of those water squirters, and I used to
the big squirter guns.
So, but I think you're right. But I think it's important to qualify, I think, two things. And one is or three things. One, Aboriginal people, we've been feeding animals for tens of thousands of years here. And so I think that's the first thing. It's about caring for the environment and being a part of it. We're all part of it together. We're not better than the rest of it. And I think it's a bit arrogant to think that we're somehow separate or better and we know what's best. So I think that's the first point. The second point you already mentioned, everywhere else in the world, including BirdLife UK and BirdLife Africa and all the other peak bird associations, they provide advice on how to feed birds, and they sell bird feeders, and so they educate people on how to feed birds the right way. And I think that's really, really important. And now I've forgotten my third point. Sorry, but I might remember.
We can hold that over for next time. Now, everybody, just so you're aware, I do want to get some questions in at the end, and Gregory does have to go pretty soon. So for the Threatened Species Commissioner thing, I know Gregory's happy to come back at another time that we can work out. So we'll do a whole session on that. But I do want to raise a couple of points just to get some comment about the whole thing about calling something a commissioner. So and I'll do a little preamble so it's easy for me to clip it out. My main problem with the title, the Threatened Species Commissioner, is that it, in a way, it builds it up to make it sound as important and influential as, say, the Productivity Commission, right? Or,
Human Rights Commissioner, or the Police Commissioner,
or even the Child Safety Commissioner, which is the one getting all the airtime at the moment.
Yeah.
But you can... I'd like you to tell me what you told me about where the Threatened Species Commissioner sits, because if people don't understand where it sits in the hierarchy and the role, then people are going to think like I did when it was first touted, because it gets all the publicity, that it would be important and there'd be Senate estimates hearings about what the Threatened Species Commissioner said and what the Commission said, like there is for every time the Productivity Commission releases a report. So can you paint that picture, and we'll perhaps that'll be a starting off point for the discussion.
And so, look, actually, the Threatened Species Commissioner does appear before Senate estimates. So I used to do that. I really enjoyed it because I got to tell stories about real Australians who were saving endangered species. But the Threatened Species Commissioner is a public servant and is like senior executive in the Environment Department. That's where I was, but reporting through a few layers to the Minister officially. And I was really lucky, I think, particularly with Greg Hunt, to have a really good relationship with him where I could communicate directly with him. But look, I think that and people used to get confused. I remember people would say, "Oh, they'd introduce me to their children. You need to meet Gregory. He's the minister for threatened species." And then I remember one ambassador actually said, "Oh, Gregory, you're the best dressed member of the Australian cabinet." And I was like, I'm not a cabinet minister. And I'm not even a minister. I'm a public servant. But I do think that there are pros and cons either way, and there's no right or wrong. So the Threatened Species Commissioner, when I was the commissioner, was embedded in the Environment Department, and that's where I believe it still is. The advantage is if you have the right capabilities and the right momentum, and particularly if there's money around in government, being in the department, you have more influence to get money. So if I'd been an independent commissioner, I could have criticised the government's policies, but I wouldn't have been able to mobilise hundreds of millions of dollars for threatened species conservation. So the advantage was being in the department to mobilise funding, but the disadvantage was that I was a public servant, and so I couldn't criticise government policy. And personally, I think, like, I'm on the record, I've written a few op-eds, and before the election, I was sort of like, I think the Guardian and Al Jazeera and a few other news platforms interviewed me about it. And I said, look, I think the Threatened Species Commissioner needs to be independent, because in the department, you can mobilise a lot of money. But the two biggest, like, our threats, we've got our invasive species, and actually mobilising money for that was something I could do quite effectively. But I couldn't criticise, for example, biodiversity offset policies, or I couldn't criticise the government's climate change policies, because as a public servant, I wasn't allowed to comment on government policy, let alone criticise it. It's actually against the law. There's an act called the Australian Public Service Act that public servants can't even say on Facebook, criticise government policy on Facebook. It's a breach of the code of conduct. It'd be nice if the politicians applied a code of conduct to themselves, but that's another issue. And I have a lot of respect for Mark Dreyfus. I think he's doing a great job in sort of bringing in more accountability.
Yeah.
But so the disadvantage of the Threatened Species Commissioner model is if you don't have a passionate minister and government supportive of conservation, then it risks becoming a greenwashing exercise. Yeah. However, I do think that I'm really pleased and excited to see we've got a minister in Tanya Plibersek who genuinely cares about the environment. You can see she wears that on her heart and is putting energy into the job and being honest about the problems, like that report that was covered up for years, if not months, on the state of Australia's environment, months, if not years. And then she released it very quickly. So I think she deserves a fair go and praise for what she's doing, and including establishing Environment Protection Agency. So if you had the commissioner, if the head of the Environment Protection Agency was a commissioner, see, they wouldn't necessarily be able to mobilise money. And the way the public service works is the public servants often get cross with those independent commissioners because they say what needs to be said. And so then it's harder for them to actually secure funding from within the government.
But
so
what they never do, Gregory, though, and this is my frustration with it, is that the PR around the position and around the commission is really good, right? I don't have a problem with that. But as you've said, there's three levels of the public service before you can get to the minister, which means anything can be, yes, ministered.
Yes.
Yes, we'll hold a review or blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
I I wish that, and this will be the same for the
Yeah.
for the environment protection, and if they have a biodiversity commissioner or something as well,
Mm.
there should be some legislation that means the minister must take account in decisions
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
reports and recommendations
Mm.
from the commissioner. Then it means
Yeah.
something. Then
Yeah. I yeah.
like in immigration, the immigration minister can
Mm.
do what he or she wants,
Yeah.
but the process must take into account
Yes.
advice.
Yeah.
Whereas that's missing in conservation,
Mm.
and
I
that's why
yeah.
it's weak. From
Yeah.
my That's my opinion.
I actually look. I think I overall I agree with you, and um, I'm proud of everything that I achieved as the Threatened Species Commissioner. But I was also lucky to have a fantastic team, and the secretary of the department at the time, Gordon de Brouwer, really trusted me to and allowed me to communicate directly with the minister, and the minister trusted me. So I don't know how it works now because I purposely think it's not proper for me to interfere or comment,
No, of
and
course
I have
you've got to
respect
step back.
for yeah, I've got to step back, and I have respect for the people who have done the job and are doing the job now. But structurally, like if you had to choose between being able to mobilise more money from the government or implement, monitor, and implement and strengthen biodiversity conservation laws to stop habitat degradation and to ensure that like offset schemes, etc., have integrity, you'd have to choose the latter. And so
Yeah,
what's missing in Australia is strong laws that are implemented and where companies and people who degrade the environment are held to account. And the fact that thousands of hectares in the Northern Territory has been completely razed to the ground, and it's only really become an issue because it was a news story.
yep.
Otherwise, it
But
would.
see,
For cotton is an example. So that was
yeah,
apparently,
but
like
can I?
according to the media, it's just a flagrant disregard for the law, and it's
Yep.
ignored.
But Gregory,
Yeah,
I need to pull up on that one a little bit
yeah,
because, of course, that's and I'm not saying that if it was illegal clearing, it's okay.
yeah,
But what we ignore every day is that it's
yeah.
legal in Queensland today to get
Oh,
two bulldozers and a
yeah.
chain
I
and
know.
and take down countless
Yeah,
hectares of
yeah.
important habitat. And
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
I'm not. I believe Tanya Plibersek deserves a go,
Mm,
but we're nearly a year into this government,
yeah.
which means that it's a year until we start going into election
Yeah.
campaign mode in this
Yeah.
country. I want to see her do
Mm,
something. I want to see forests being
yeah.
cut down. I want to see her have a go at the Queensland
Yeah.
government. I want to see her have a go at
Mm.
what's going on in Western Australia with
You know, there's a
so
biodiversity crisis, like
yep,
there is a climate crisis, and like I've said again in op-eds and when interviewed by the Guardian or whatever, Australia actually needs to stop all habitat
that's
degradation.
right.
We've got
And
enough land, and we've degraded. Well, like when I drive to Wombat Ridge, it's an hour and a half's drive. I drive through lots of empty, degraded country. We don't need to degrade any more country. We can invest in the country that's been degraded. Every hectare of remaining habitat needs protecting. Yeah, this just infuriated me. This that where they've raised this development just outside of Queanbeyan. Not only they've taken there's not even a blade of grass left, let alone a
but
tree. And they have the hide to call it Jumping Creek, and they talk about it how it's a sanctuary by a burbling river. and but so we need to stop all habitat degradation. We're a wealthy country. We can afford to. We've got enough land to dedicate the remaining land to nature, which is actually providing a huge service to us as humans. And at the same time, with climate change, we equally need to stop mining coal and LNG and oil. We need to stop mining and exporting fossil fuels and move ASAP to renewables.
So there's
Yeah,
that's a good point to sort of wind up
yeah,
the podcast episode. I'll just say, Gregory, there's a couple of people in this country who have the power to do things at the stroke of a pen, and they're called ministers. And Tanya Plibersek is one of those. And it might be difficult within the Labor Party, but
yeah.
you know they can't do anything without the Greens.
I'd love to see a dirt showing more ambitious on stopping all new fossil fuel projects and stopping all habitat degradation, and also putting an end to these ridiculous regional forest agreements that let the governments like the Victorian government and Tasmanian government and New South Wales government rampage and destroy beautiful Australian forests.
And the new form of greenwashing, which is conflating climate change with action on biodiversity, and we need to pull those two things out. By doing something which is climate positive, it doesn't make it something we should tick off if it fails the biodiversity test.
They need to meet both. Climate action is good for biodiversity, but it has to be subject to this rigorous development assessment, so that the industrial process of climate action doesn't harm the environment. We need to get emissions down, and actually the main way we need to do that is actually stop coal mining and stop all of these LNG and fracking projects, which are also horrific for the environment. I flew over the Hunter Valley once. I've got some in a helicopter, and I took a video, and everyone thinks the Hunter Valley is just this beautiful place with all these vineyards. It's just all these horrific holes in the ground. With like rows of trees between the road and the coal mine, so you can't see it. But anyway.
And I'd
like to see that happen.
People, if you are interested in what I think is the latest greenwashing wave, have a look at the power company. What is it? Acciona? Is that what it's called in? I'm not sure if they're in Queensland, but they've got ads all over Twitter at the moment, and for their wind farms. That's going to be the next battleground. But Gregory, we'll finish up the podcast episode now. Yep. I know you've told me that you're happy to come back, so we'll tease out so many of these issues again. But podcast listeners, remember, thebirdemergency.com/live is where you can find what's coming up live. And I'd ask you to check out the hashtag first seen and heard, which is where I take notice of the first birds that I see and hear each day. And if you want to know where Gregory's info on Wombat Ridge is, you can follow Wombat Ridge on Twitter, but the website, lyrebirddreaming.com, is where you can get more detail on everything we've started talking about with Wombat Ridge. So,
great.
Gregory Andrews, thanks a bunch for
having me.
On the Bird Emergency.
I feel like we probably needed to talk more about birds, but we were talking about the next thing up from birds, which is their habitat that they need, and that we have a responsibility to look after and care for.
Definitely.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on the show.
Okay, right, squad.
All right.
We're not ending the stream. Gregory's got a dash soon, but if you've got a quick question for the look, I don't want to call you the peanut gallery, but I just imagine that there's the grumpy old men from the Muppets are there watching, and people saying yes. 100% right, Gregory. I agree. And then we've got
H2 Rider,
and we've got the H2 Riders Murray, I believe.
Methane Methane is 27 times more powerful than CO2. Its global warming potential is 27, which means for every kilogram of methane is equivalent to releasing 27 kilos of CO2.
That's right, and that's why landfill is a really.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah,
I get
and it
disappointed
leaks
that
out
we're
of the
not
ground
having.
from coal mining.
I get
Huge
disappointed that we're not having the sophisticated discussions about how everything is interlinked. That people are trying to have these little committees or little projects on one little tiny thing, but we should be able to mobilise all the economic benefits and sticks, carrots and sticks, to move to behavioural change, but we seem to be a long way away from that. So Riot Squad, opportunity for questions before Gregory's got a dash, and we'll work out when we're going to do this again, and if there's specific things you want to talk about, there's a couple of things we're going to follow up with Gregory. One is going to be the Indigenous land management practices, and how we can utilise them for all the settler classes who are managing most of the land in the country. So we want to,
and a lot of non-Indigenous people are really interested in cultural burning. Actually, we had one cultural burn where I invited the RFS to come along, and two came along. And I thought I was going to benefit from them, that helped me stop a wildfire. But they actually really were interested in learning about cultural burning. So, yeah, I think there's a huge amount there, because we need to get cultural burning going big time. But it belongs to all of us, not just Aboriginal people. We can share that like we share other ideas and technology and cultural practices with all of Australia.
And we need to be less prideful, I think, that not all wisdom resides in the rich and economically powerful. Sometimes they're idiots.
Just in response to that question from Kangaroo Island TV,
Stan.
Yeah, I think the most important thing there that will hopefully make a difference is establishing a environment protection authority. So at a national level, we don't have an authority. We just have, we have a department that's responsible to a minister who has the discretion to override advice. But if we have an authority that's independent, a statutory authority, whose job it is to actually provide the advice that's needed, not what the minister wants to hear. And we saw with the Morrison government how addicted it got to telling bureaucrats that they needed to tell it what it wanted to hear rather than what it needed to hear. And so an environment protection authority, if it's done well, I think will really help. And then ramping up the laws and ramping up the penalties, and finally implementing and enforcing those penalties and those laws is what we really need to do.
And Naomi's got a question. How did you turn the property into a protected area? What are the benefits? And I'm wondering if if Naomi also means, are there any sort of incentives? And does it need to be a certain size to do it?
Yeah, thanks, Naomi. Actually, so what we did is, and you can do some research if you Google Biodiversity Conservation Trust New South Wales, you'll find it. Each state, depending on where you are, but each state has a different mechanism. Some of them are statutory authorities and some of them are non-government. And so we negotiated an agreement, a covenant with them that belongs to the land. So even if I die or my wife and I sold the property to Gina Reinhardt, it's still protected. So it's not a contract between me and the government, or it's a promise that it attaches to the land. It had to be assessed because they prioritise land. So I suppose I use my local knowledge to some extent in terms of what I bought, buying land. I wanted to buy land that wasn't covenanted because I wanted to increase the size of Australia's protected area, and because it does count as part of our protected area according to the UN. So that's how we did it. And then if you just Google land covenanting or conservation covenanting and then your state, you'll find it if you're not in New South Wales. Like the names are a bit different in each state. There are some benefits. The main benefit for me is this deep sense of satisfaction that I get. And like my wife and I, our marriage, our wedding day, the birth of our two children are two of our favourite days through it. But the other one is the day that we signed that covenant. And it felt like such a good feeling to protect that bit of Australia and give it the legal status so that it can't be turned into a housing development or a coal mine or something. There are a few other benefits, like actually we haven't accessed them until this year, but we got the grant to install the nest boxes. So we put a lot of our own money into it, but the Biodiversity Conservation Trust, for people who put the covenants on their land, they give you can apply for grants to fulfill the promises you've made. So that, like, in our agreement, we commit to, and it's illegal, for example, to remove firewood or do any development, but we also commit to control invasive species and to manage the land. And so the money, the grant funding that's available can help you do that. Great thing to do, covenanting. I just love it. I just love the idea of covenanting. It's so much better than buying like a real estate on the Gold Coast or something, when, if you've got a bit of spare money.
This is one of the things I say about all those billionaires who are wanting to, give away their money. Jeez, they could make such a difference by just doing this on every piece of, valuable habitat and land that could be rehabilitated rather rapidly.
Yeah,
they could do this.
Yeah.
So
nobody
needs to wait.
No, and if you're a farmer and you already own some land, you don't have to covenant the whole block.
No.
So we put a
covenant some corridors.
You can covenant corridors.
That's right.
Or it can even just be, it could say you won't have more than a certain amount of cattle, and that you'll protect the trees on certain ridges. And so the covenanting doesn't have to be all or nothing or absolute.
There's a good question.
Oh, yeah. So actually, we haven't really had any open days yet, H2 Rider, but we've had a few like sort of more private visits, and we've had the RFS come. But I think we will, and we've had a few volunteer weeding days where people come and help volunteer. But we're looking at ways that we can actually make it more accessible. It's kind of a bit inaccessible. You need a proper four-wheel drive. Like, you could probably get in there in like a Subaru Forester, but it might be a bit dodgy. But I also like that because it keeps the riffraff out.
Yeah.
People that are going in and wanting to shoot or dirt bike and that sort of thing.
We might have to do a bird emergency episode out there one day.
Yeah, it'd be great. Except there's no Wi-Fi.
No, but we can record it. We can record it.
Yeah, there's one dot of 3G.
As we discovered when we had a chat. Now, Naomi made a comment before about just about the enforcement for people who don't do the right thing. So we'll mention that. Now, Murray, that's you could probably. Well, I don't know. Maybe we could look at that, Gregory. Maybe get a group of bird nerds to come out and do something like Janine Duffy does with her Echidna tours.
Tours. I think I'd like to invite the COG, the Canberra Ornithological Group, to come out. There's a lot of opportunities. I saw that question about weeding. we're quite lucky. Like the conservation assessment said that it's not, that it's in good condition and there aren't a lot of weeds. But I've got a zero tolerance policy for them. So that grant, we used that grant. We got $8,000 this year to pay a contract weed sprayer to go through and meticulously just target any. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've been doing a lot of weeding ourselves. I use a machete and I just go through and cut out Scotch thistles and that sort of thing. Mm.
Now, something totally indulgent. I just want to let the community know that if you aren't following me on Twitter, I have just ticked up to 2,999 followers. Okay.
Wow, you just need one more.
Just saying. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Now, do you need to fly? Yeah, because I
need to go and pick up my daughter from her shift at McDonald's. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, if she needs any motivation, as I was sharing with Naomi the other day, I was sharing way too much about my previous life. For someone who used to love eating McDonald's stuff,
yeah,
I'm 40 kilos less of a man than I used to be. So
are you? Since you stopped eating Maccas?
Well, since I stopped eating all rubbish, crap.
Yeah,
And someone my age who needs no medication and no monitoring for anything anymore, after being someone who had to carry around a bunch of things whenever I went away.
Yeah,
there's some benefits in just giving it away. So
there are healthy eating. Actually, I decided to stop drinking. I never was a big drinker, but I just don't drink anymore. And I find that it's really good for my physical health, but also I don't get anxiety anymore. Whereas I used to feel anxious, and alcohol can make you feel anxious. Yeah.
I cycled in and out of depression from my teenage years right through into my 40s, and I would never have got that under control if I didn't stop drinking grog, because I like drinking wine, and and you know, everyone likes a good time. You just have to learn to have a good time without it.
Exactly. H2 Rider just said that he's in his local land care group, or she, I should say. Hey, H2 Rider. Sorry,
I think it was Murray.
Or they.
So
I should say. Yeah. But anyway, we're in our local land care group here too, just up there. We do weeding once a month, and I like that. But yeah, I better go and pick up my daughter, Tilly.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. I'll be in touch about organising another one. You can just jump out whenever you want, and I'll keep chatting with the gang.
Righto. Okay,
thanks, Gregory. It's been great. There we go. He's out. Naomi, Trust for Nature is another place in Victoria that's you can organise covenants through Trust for Nature. I imagine they're also operating in New South Wales. So that was fun, wasn't it? And I'm assuming you'll all be happy that Gregory will be joining us again. I think there's so much to talk about with Gregory, and he's so keen to share his experiences that we might, you know, who knows, it might be like a monthly thing. With Gregory, and we'll probably double him with Holly a few times. So how good's that, hey? I mean, I'm really lucky to have so much experience and expertise willing to come and join me on the show. Anything else you guys want to talk about? You know, you want to share? I'm going to go back and have a look at my numbers and see if we've ticked over to 3,000 yet. No, still one to go. So Damien Bates became number 2,999. Doesn't mean anything. It's just nice. And once we get to 3,000, then I can head to start working towards 4,000. Apparently at 10,000 you become an influencer, like a general a general purpose influencer. So then maybe someone might pay attention to something I say. That would be cool. Um, there we go. Hey Peter, how are you today? Yeah, well, I think we need to do things like covenanting if we can, if governments won't act, and if covenanting doesn't end up as a economic minus for people, that would be great. Yeah, Naomi, I love that he was prepared to talk about it. There were some stories that he told me that we can't broadcast really, but it's crucial that these positions, if they don't actually have any authority to make a decision or a recommendation, which is fairly binding, well then they're only PR. You know, it's like, yeah, good, let's have a bake off. And a lot of these issues about covenanting, when it comes to how it will affect asset value, we'll probably talk about not so much about covenanting, but this whole move towards doing less, using less, exploiting less. Next week when we talk about degrowth, not really sure where I land on the whole degrowth thing. Naomi, you might be familiar with Matt Leck. I've invited Matt Leck to join us because he's got really specific views about not supporting degrowth for particular reasons. I mean, degrowth just seems like a no-brainer, but my problem with it is, how do you sell something that means if we continue to be in an economic system where people's well-being into 20, 30 years into the future is tied up in a consumption-based economy. So I don't know what the answers are. So I've got someone who's a big proponent of degrowth to come on, and those are the kind of questions I'll be asking him. Yeah. Anything else you want to bring up? I think I'm still at 2,999. Let me just refresh. Yes, still the same. And also, if you think of things that you would like to raise with Gregory, you can let me know, and I can put it into the. Unlimited growth can't keep going. You're dead right. Spaceship Earth. It's not a new concept. I'm always amazed when there's all this talk about construction and concrete and paving and roads, and eventually we're going to have to be digging up every beach if we need sand, or crushing all the rocks, or, but no one's allowed to say it, which like teachers, and I mean the US, what a farce. Anyway, I don't think we're not much better here. We're just less doctrinaire about the way we go about silencing ideas. So I'm going to wrap it up now. I'm going to go and buy. I saw that there were some marked down Asian greens at one of the stores. I'm going to go and get a bunch of Asian greens so that I can cook up a beautiful big lot of soup for the next week. So it's great to have had you all on board again. Appreciate all your comments, your interactions. And I'm so pleased that we're able to serve up someone like Gregory as a guest. I think that was fantastic. So let's do the going, gone. Any final thoughts or comments? Dun, dun, not actually bok choy, Naomi. It's the other Japanese style greens. So yeah, I'm going to try them out in a big vegetable soup, and also in a Thai style red curry with tofu. Yeah. And tomorrow I'm going down to buy some tofu tempeh starter, so that I can do my first homemade tempeh. So yeah, thanks. You'll have to tell me, make sure I got it right. Murray, right? Thanks, Murray. That was great. Okay. I will do that. While I'm commuting, I'll catch up on the stuff. Yeah, subscribe to Stan's channel. And Stan too. Probably just working out what the schedule's going to be for the next 2 weeks, but we're going to do an episode where we talk about your plot and the plants I suggest, and the honey eater questions. Oh, that's what I was meaning to say in relation to first seen and heard today. Wasn't my first seen and heard, but for the first time in years, I heard from inside here a couple of noisy miners. So I hope they haven't come back to dominate the park. Yeah. On YouTube, Naomi, Kangaroo Island TV, you'll find Stan's channel. Get to see quite a bit of quite a few of the beaches. Ooh, 500 subs. Okay, that's what I'm looking for next. 500, and then we go on that mission for 1,000. Hey, Stan. Yeah, we're going to have to do I'll have to get you on to as a co-host for a show to get you in front of piles more people, Stan. We'll work that out. All right, that's it. Thanks, Ride Squad. Always love it. See you. I might pop up tomorrow doing a replay of either Mark Holdsworth or Simon Verdon talking about the translocation of the Mallee emu wren. I'm not sure, but I will do something on Wednesday, but it will probably be more like 2 p.m. rather than midday. Anyway, you know what to do. Just look out for the notifications and check out the live page. All right. Thanks, everyone. Uru.